Hey guys, this is Adam Carswell, and today I'm joined by Derrick Reiner. Derrick is a real estate entrepreneur and podcast host. He was born and raised in the Houston, Texas area, went to Sam Houston State University, and is working on his master's right now, actually, at the University of Houston. Derrick now lives in Tomball, Texas, which is a suburb of Houston. Derrick, thank you for coming on the show. And do you have any opening remarks for our listeners?
Thanks for having me, Adam. I'd really just like to say that it's been a pleasure getting to know you over the last 2 years. Adam and I actually met through the Cash Flow Connections mentor program. He was one of the first people, along with Hunter Thompson, that I really had the privilege of getting to know within the commercial real estate industry. That connection and taking that action is really something that launched the snowball effect of what I have going on now.
Yeah, really excited to talk about an array of topics here today, guys. I'm sure if you clicked on this episode, if you're like Derrick and I, you're already excited to hear what we're gonna talk about. But Derrick's got some really cool things going on in his world professionally too that are brand new. I've said on LinkedIn, kind of given a forecast, guys. If you're in commercial real estate, keep your eyes on Derrick. He's going to be a top thought leader in 2021. I'm calling it now. And also, I just want to take a step back too. I had a call yesterday with Hunter Thompson, who Derrick just referenced, who's boss, friend, mentor of mine. And we had a call, and he's like, you know what? He's like, I've stayed away from it for a while, but I'm going to start posting my podcasts and my podcast interviews on YouTube. And as I've grown Dream Chasers, I've always stayed away from posting on YouTube, mainly from the time commitment that came along with it in regards to editing and whatnot. But after my call with Hunter, he was like, it's just leaving too much content and information on the table to not be doing it. So I am going to implement right after the day after I hear my mentor tell me what he's going to do. Guys, thank you. This Dream Chasers is now back on YouTube, and really for the first time ever, you're getting to see our faces too, Derrick. So you're the the poster child of this YouTube debut. If you guys are tuned in on the podcast platforms, whether it's Apple, Spotify, you name it, you are going to have a more condensed, edited version with ads and whatnot. But if you're here on YouTube watching us, like, this is live raw footage. So if we make any mistakes, like, you can laugh along with us. So anyways, yes, that's some context there. And Derrick kind of mentioned how we know each other too. One other thing that this is a little bit of an appetizer for the direction we're taking this conversation. But one thing that I know, looking back on it, Derrick and I got along very well. And this makes perfect sense because we met through Hunter. We have some very similar worldviews. I don't know if I would ever be someone to like proudly say I am this, for example, but there are a lot of principles of libertarianism that I think are just fantastic. I think a lot of the world has no idea about a lot of these ideas and philosophies. So, Derrick, I'm going to flip it back over to you now and kind of share maybe some memories that you had of us talking about our worldviews when we first met.
Sure. You know, I really went through an interesting transition that brought a lot of this about when I was in the military. And it's in regard to why do we believe the things that we believe? What are our first principles and how do we get there? And some of the conversations that we had really, they revolved around the concept of self-ownership, both having the responsibility of your actions, but the freedom to choose what your actions should be as long as they fit within the worldview that I think you and I both share. And that is, it really stems from the concept of libertarian ideology, which is self-ownership and the non-aggression principle. It stems from, the conversations that we've had of, who is the legitimate owner of your body? I would say that I own my body. Occam's razor, a principle used in scientific methodology, essentially says that the thing that is the most direct cause, the thing that makes the most sense, should be what we go with. And, I tell my hands to move as they are now. No one else can do that besides me. I know how that essentially I send signals, through my brain to my hands. And, it's through the kind of these just fundamental logical conclusions that you can say, like, you own yourself. And then what are the logical implications from that? If I own myself, do I own the product of my labor? Does another entity, whether that be an individual, a government, a business, do they have a higher right to the product of my labor than I do? I would say no.
Hmm.
And so a lot of our conversations really, they stemmed from philosophical ideology on what makes us drive. And for me, it's such a freeing thought to say that, I own myself, I own my action, I own the position that I put myself in. And if those lead to a negative consequence, then I own that too.
Mm, well said, well said. And I think that's, do you own the I don't know the exact phrase you use, but the fruits of your own labor, do you own that? You should own all of it, right? And that's why I'm wearing this shirt right here, guys. Taxation is theft. Go to ix9.shop and buy yourself one. We do deserve to own the rights or the fruits of our own labor. And I think we don't realize, I was listening to a guy named Myron Golden speak the other day, and he did just a presentation where kind of just writes taxes on the whiteboard, and basically he's like, do you guys all realize here that half of what you make is going to the government? He's like, actually no, I take that back, more than half of what you make, because you're paying half your salary in taxes, and then you don't realize when you go to the store you get taxed again when you go to it's like, so everyone's getting double taxed, we don't realize it. And I don't really know if this interview is going to be the one to save the world, but hopefully we just get people start thinking in a different direction. um, but guys, this takes us again in the direction of the topic of our interview. Derrick, it is now time to step into the next level chamber. And if you guys are watching us on YouTube right now, there would have been a sound effect that played there. Go listen to the Spotify version. But anyways, Derrick, the topic of our conversation is creating freedom for you and your people, regardless of who's running the world. I'm really excited to zone in on this because I think there couldn't be a more perfect time to have a conversation around this topic with everything going on in the world. We got the elections going on. Try not to give too much publicity to the elections, but you can't ignore it. So, um, with the elections happening, I think a lot of people like to point fingers and think that, we'll just say this as an example, Joe Biden or Donald Trump is the reason why they can't do X, Y, Z. And now that I say that, the first thing that comes to mind for me is anyone who would be thinking that way needs to figure out how they can go through a mindset change. And that's like easier said than done. But if you're going to think that it's someone else's fault why you can't do something, you need to go back to what Derrick just said, which is that principle of ownership, extreme ownership. And so, taking a dive into a little bit of what you're doing personally, Derrick, I know you have your syndications firm, Rhino Capital Investment. You have your podcast. You have your job your job. I don't know if you want to go into details about your job, but basically, I think you're a great example of how there's someone in our society preparing and creating a free future for you and your family. So go ahead and I know I just threw a lot out at you there, but feel free to follow up on it.
Sure. I'd like to maybe take a step back and start off about 5 years ago. So I was in, so I had joined the military, and at the time, I thought it was a very noble action where I could essentially, serve my country, be a part of something greater than myself while also setting myself up for the future. And so even though when I joined the military, I didn't think of it from that perspective, I was positioning myself even back then. And so fast forward, I was a sergeant in the Army, just shy of 7 years. I was a sergeant for 4 years. I had essentially established myself where I thought I had a firm foundation to a successful career in the military. And I ended up being medically discharged. And so all of a sudden, having a wife, a daughter at the time, expecting our third coming up in March.
Congratulations.
Thanks. We, all of a sudden I was in a place where I had absolute uncertainty to my future. And it was terrifying, and so I started applying a lot of the skill set that I'd learned in the military to my own personal life, and taking that ownership of my actions. And so, you know, long story short, I was able to go from not knowing what I would be doing, but following my passion, which, so my undergraduate was economics. I earned an honors degree in economics, concentrating within finance and economics. And so using that, I'd actually, I realized I came through commercial real estate through the understanding of business cycle theory and how that affected the real estate cycle. And so, really the first kind of overlying thought that I had sitting through a monetary economics course when we were discussing business cycle theory came to terms with how real estate could be advantageously positioned throughout any time of the cycle, just purely from the theoretical underpinnings. And while there's many more complexities than that, it was such an enlightening thought to have. And what I mean by that is, let's say you're at a point in the business cycle where you've just gone, let's say a given region society has just gone through a recession. And throughout that period of a business cycle, you would essentially see cap rate expansion as values start to fall, regardless of what's happening to net operating income. And so when you're young in a new cycle and you've just gone through a value reset, so to speak, you know that despite there being little change in net operating income, you can expect to realize a positive gain in value simply associated with moving throughout the cycle. Now, what that means from a theoretical perspective is it's much less risky to further leverage your investment. Now, apply that same mentality maybe towards the end of a cycle. We've just seen cap rate compression, values have risen, and now there's more uncertainty about what the future values will hold. Are we going to see a cap rate expansion and have values decrease? Kind of historically known with how we see real estate cycles. And so with that mentality, you can take a step back and say, okay, well, instead of maybe having a thesis of value creation through, theoretical underpinnings of the business cycle, now we can take a lower loan to value and have a more conservative investment where we really position ourselves for cash flow. And so having that mentality, understanding that nature of real estate, but not having any formal background in real estate finance, which is just such a different beast than mainstream finance, I knew I needed to position myself to surround myself with people who were doing what I wanted to do. And so I actually, at the time I was at Ernst & Young as a quality assurance associate analyst, and I'd gained some financial experience working on the internal verification of application controls. But I knew that was not where my passion was. And so I'd planned to stay there for 2 to 3 years and then perhaps pursue my MBA. Well, 5 months into being there, my wife was actually given a full ride scholarship, and it allowed her to have her master degree paid for, to the point where all we had to do was relocate to within the region that Sam Houston offered the program. You had to essentially be with a partner school that she could work at throughout that year. So I used that reset in my life as a way to immediately start positioning myself. And what I did was I reached out to Hunter Thompson. I had been listening to his podcast for a year and a half or so. I had an introduction into commercial real estate from that regard, but I knew that would not be enough. If I wanted to be at a firm that dealt with institutional quality real estate, I knew I needed to bridge the gap in my education. And so I joined, I reached out to him, and he let me know that he was considering officially launching the Cash Flow Connection Mentor Program. And so I actually had an introductory call with yourself and with him. And that's really where we started to get to know each other. And I realized, from that day, it's like the content I got out of his course was phenomenal. But I think the key to his course is understanding the network you're putting yourself in by surrounding yourself with like-minded individuals who share a pursuit of a common goal. Mm. And so there was so much that came out about that. And so, like I said, I had transitioned to Houston with my wife, and I immediately went into pursuing my MBA full time. So I always joke, I was taking 15 hours that semester. It was all introductory coursework for the MBA. But I always joke that I took 18 hours because I considered that mentor program to be a sixth class. Mm-hmm. And I got so much out of it. I always joke. So when I had 101 hours out of my 131 at my undergrad that I completed after I got out of the military, and I attained a 3.97 GPA during that time. And I always joke, the only B's I've ever made, one was when I was full-time summer school at my undergrad. I was renovating my own house about 30 hours per week, driving an hour each way to school. And it was just crazy busy. I got a B, oh well. But then I also, the only B I've ever made in my MBA was that first semester, because I prioritized the thing that I knew would move the needle over the monotonous coursework that was just seen as the foundation coursework for that program. And it was, what's your opportunity cost? And I knew for me that I would rather devote myself to my passion and get by in my other courses. And so what that actually set me up to do was, after completing the mentor program and finishing that semester, I started interviewing, and I actually received an offer to join Altus Group, which is, Altus really does so much so Altus really does so much. They do, Altus actually has Argus Enterprise, which is a commonly used commercial real estate financial modeling software. And then they also really get into data analytics. And then I actually work within global advisory. And so what I've been able to do within advisory is assist my team in the valuation management process, which includes appraisal review, and appraisal management of our clients' institutional quality assets. And so by taking the time to get into the mentor program and really align my time with the best use would be, I was actually able to drop down to part-time in my MBA. And now I work full-time within that field, and I'm getting just amazing experience to the world of institutional quality real estate. And it's really set myself up where, by having that hustle in the beginning, I've now been able to make Altus Group my priority as I continue my education. And I'm continuing my education on a part-time basis, but it's so much more valuable is by the time I finish my MBA. And, I draw often on leadership and management experience I gained in the military, but you can't go into a new industry despite having that experience if you don't fundamentally understand the new industry you're going into. And so by taking that initiative, I've set myself up so that once I finish my MBA, I'll have absolutely amazing experience working on multiple portfolios for more, just ranging from industrial, multifamily, retail, office. It's just been absolutely an amazing experience. And it all came about through that initial undertaking. And, since then, I've got to a place where I've realized, I have so much value that I can provide others. And so I'm launching Capital Stack with Derrick Reiner. And what we're going to do in Capital Stack is really break down commercial real estate. We're going to talk about everything from the investing side to underwriting to everyone who works within various aspects, from the legal side, from, leasing, from just, there's so many things that you can get into that, I've realized that with my understanding of commercial real estate, I can have so many different people on and getting just into in-depth conversations regarding commercial real estate to just provide value to people. But what I'm also doing is, a key takeaway from Hunter's program was, what is real estate syndication? How do we effectively raise capital for real estate deals to help really, pool investors together to go and acquire an asset that they might not have otherwise have been able to achieve on their own. And so that's an additional service I'm doing through my investment firm, Rhino Capital Investments, is where, I want to establish relationships with people where we can partner and look at offerings together, and so the name of my podcast, Capital Stack, is really a play on words between the debt and equity structure of an investment in real estate, but also the human capital it takes to be successful in your endeavors. And so I'm really wanting to use that as my initial platform to go get started and really start just building my brand and, kind of giving back some of the knowledge that I've developed over the last 2 years and, the amazing experience I've had with just, the opportunities that I've positioned myself for.
Yeah, thank you for the context there. So, guys, if you didn't catch that, I'm sure we're going to have plenty of links in the show notes and a way to follow up, and you guys can tune in to Derrick's show. Actually, is Capital Stack live yet? This interview will be going live actually close to a week from today. So,
Yeah, I'm finishing getting some branding stuff together and finishing the website. But yeah, we should be live within the next week or two.
okay. So stay tuned for Capital Stack, guys. I had a great time on there with Derrick. I'm honored to be one of his first guests. And I do want to bring it back. I want to tie it back a little bit to the just creating that freedom. What you're saying and what I'm getting is you were medically discharged from the military, but I know that during your time there, we'll say in Afghanistan, for example, because I think that's where it was, you noticed some things that maybe like they seemed like they were being forced upon the people there and it just wasn't a good fit, but because of, the US's big presence, it had to do with cell phones or something, right? You've got a cool analogy with that.
Yeah. So, what I really noticed in Afghanistan, I actually, I draw back to my time in Afghanistan as a big development of myself. Not only is it really where I first started having economic thoughts, but also it was, I broadly claim that that's where I gained so much of my multicultural experience, working with people of Afghanistan, Poland, Germany, so many places where I had an opportunity to just learn from people that had such a different background than myself. And it was truly an eye-opening experience. But yeah, so despite being in a war zone, I saw first world technology being injected into an area where it had historically not been. And so I can take a step back. If you go across the states, you commonly see small towns every 5, 10, 15 miles. And today that infrastructure is really not quite needed like that. But the reason it existed in that sense was before things really started to come about through our industrial revolution, it would be quite common for those small towns to act as a hub of commerce for people within, let's say, a 5-10 mile radius of that town. And so you would see people coming into those towns to trade, to buy, to sell, to do so many things. But they would also, if you're going one town to another, it might be a day's wagon ride, if you're taking your family or if you are hauling goods. And so you see a lot of that in Afghanistan as well. And what I realized was through the injection of first world technology into that country, I wondered what the benefit would be from the sense, over the last 100 years, 100 plus years since, let's say, most first world countries first started going through their industrial revolution, it's taken that long of a time to get to where we're at now. So, how is it going to impact people in a third world country where they're living, let's say below the global poverty line? How is that going to expedite their rise out of poverty? And those thoughts are really what I attribute to being like the foundational thoughts that drew me into economics and wanting to better understand the way the world worked. And there's so many studies out there now, but it's actually counterintuitive in a sense. But when you go in and you provide something for free, not only are you skewing the price mechanism of what you're offering, but you're actually disincentivizing a local market from picking up and building that, right? And so I've taken the economic thoughts from where I started, kind of now how I understand more formal economics. And, I would always tell people there's so many schools of economic thought. One I would highly recommend that people go and check out is the Austrian School of Economic Thought. Now, it's really, taking that multicultural experience and getting to a point where, I have my business background today. I have my real estate background. I definitely want to incorporate going global again and being a part of building that community, those communities all over the world up. Adam Smith, a classical economist, has a famous quote. He says, "It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, the baker that we expect our dinner, but their regard to their own self-interest." And so that's one thing I want to do is I want to form contacts across the world who know different regions so much more intimately and then partner with them to say, hey, yeah, I want to raise capital for real estate, but as I go, I would also really like to become more of an angel investor. And I would like to really provide capital in a way that's going to lead to sustained growth and build and bringing people out of poverty. And so that's a major thesis of my long-term
Yeah,
investments.
there you go. It's people buy not what you do, they buy why you do it. And knowing that that is a big part of the direction you're heading with your company is huge. I mean, especially taking, as you said, taking the view of, not just injecting it into and basically, forcing this technology, forcing this way of thinking into a society that's not used to it. Because again, as you said, that doesn't really produce much fruit. If anything, is counterintuitive. But what's the phrase? Teaching someone how to fish. That's the direction that, I see you going with Rhino Capital. So that's great. And I think that's one thing that we can all learn from. Um, I could keep going. I could keep going. I was trying to get you to talk a little bit more, risky politics and stuff, but we're running out of time. So guys, you could talk, you can follow up with Derrick and I at another time after this. But anyways, we did a fantastic job today going live. Everyone who's joined us here on YouTube, thank you for bearing with us if we did make any mistakes along the way. Um,
And I'd like to say too, I'd be happy to come back on and really take a deeper dive into philosophy and what shapes my actions and the way I look at some of the things I was a part of in the past.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Because I'm sure you've seen some things that most of us don't know are going on in the world. But anyways, Derrick, we're closing it out. Can you give a shout out to someone that you've never given a shout out to before?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, sure. Somebody that had a profound impact on my life while I was living a completely different life was First Sergeant David Folks. First Sergeant Folks was my battery, which a battery is essentially a company, but for air defense, we're crazy, called it our own thing. So our first sergeant for our battery, he was a pivotal influence in me first kind of getting to that mindset of I'm going to position myself as well as I can. I made sergeant in 1 week shy of 3 week. I made sergeant in 1 week shy of my 3 year mark. And it's usually typical for someone to take 4 to 5 years to make sergeant. And so David Folks, he really was an inspiration to me. He pushed me to be better. He expected nothing less of my best because he knew I could do it. And I'd like to say thank you and give him a shout out for what he really inspired in me, going on 9 years ago.
There you go. David, was it Folks?
David Folks.
David Folks. Thank you, David, for raising up Derrick Reiner. Well, guys, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you for tuning in. Derrick, what is the single, if you had to give out one way, single best way for anyone tuned in to follow up and get in touch with you?
Sure. Shoot me an email to my email. It is Derrick, DERRICK, at Rhino Capital Investments, and that is RYNO capitalinvestments.com.
Boom. There you go, guys. Derrick Reiner on his Dream Chasers debut. Who knows? Maybe we'll bring him back and go down some more rabbit holes. I encourage anyone listening today, if you like this kind of outside of the box thinking, to go back. I want to say somewhere in the 70s, and I think episode 49 as well. We have some deep, long format conversations with some close friends of mine, John Caldwell and Nadir Price. And that just popped in my head right there. Those are some great chats, more philosophical. So thank you for tuning in to Dream Chasers, Interviews with the Future. We will catch you in the next episode. Remember, in all you think, say, and do, take it to the next level.